Okay, so I'm going to go over sort of the basics of selecting and then masking in Photoshop. This is going to help you immensely if you're interested in doing collage in Photoshop because we have to be able to isolate different parts of an image in order to bring them all together. So this is the same photo I was working on before. I deleted my sharpening layer because I want to go back and do some editing, and that's very much like a final touch kind of thing. So you don't see that anymore, but all of my other edits are here. So let's say I want to do something different with the hands in this image. First things first, I need to select them. If you use a Wacom tablet, which we have available in the classroom, this will be a lot easier. I don't have one with me today, but we can definitely use that during class. So if I go over here to the selection tool on my toolbar, I've got a couple different options. I have the lasso tool, which just lets me freely select something. A keyboard shortcut for deselect is Command D. That's going to be really helpful if you accidentally select the wrong thing. Then I have the polygonal lasso tool, and this allows me to make straight lines. So I click and I add an anchor point, and then everything else from there is straight. That can be great if you're doing something that's more square. I actually use it a lot for my selections. There's also the magnetic lasso tool, which will differentiate pixels, and all you have to do is click on a starting point and then drag your mouse around the edge of the thing that you want to select. Now, this can work really well. Um, it can not work so well. Helps if you're zoomed in a little bit, which is Command plus. So you can see this is doing a pretty good job differentiating, but then there's that little bump right there. And um, you can see that it's not necessarily like the straightest line. If I double click, that will connect my points. Uh, so that can be an option depending on um, what type of image you're using. Now there's this AI option to select a subject or remove the background. Um, if you are wanting to do some masking, I would try select the subject and see what it does. This image is confusing. You can see that didn't work very well. It like kind of got the edge over here, but I don't really like the way it did that. And it's kind of creating more work for me. So I'm just gonna do deselect. Um, okay. So I would probably in this situation use the polygonal lasso tool, and I'm just gonna like very closely go on the edge of my image and edit it and select it this way. Um, you have to make kind of small selections in certain areas because this is a straight line, right? So if I go too far, it's not going to work. So I'm clicking multiple places in order to make these points. Now, if I had a Wacom tablet, I could use a paintbrush tool to do this, um, which would be probably easier, but I don't really have the control, which is my mouse pad. Um, so I'm not going to do this whole hand because it's going to take me too long to select the whole thing. Um, so I'm just going to do a portion of it. And this is pretty messy. If I was doing this for real, I would take a lot more time, go a lot slower. Okay, so now I have my selection. Now, let's say you've made your selection and you realize that you actually need to add something to it. You have some options up here. So when you see these two filled in boxes that when you hover over, it says add to selection. You can also subtract from the selection. So let's say I want to add, so I can just click into the selection that I already made and I can add in something. And then I just go back to my point so that it's connected. If I want to subtract, now I know that it's set on subtract because I can see that little subtraction or minus sign. Um, and then I basically just select the part that I want subtracted, and there we go. All right, so now I have what I want selected. I'm clicked on the background copy, and I'm gonna hit this button down here that says layer mask. So what I've just done is created a layer mask for this portion. You can't tell because the background layer is behind it, but if I were to turn that off, now you'll see that I have a selection of just this portion of the hand. It could be helpful to name this. So let's just pretend that I selected the whole hand. So I would just click hands. If you're getting confused as to what you have selected, you can just turn off the background layer. So now let's say I want my hands to be desaturated. So I'm going to go to my adjustments panel, hue saturation, and then I'm going to click this button right here, which is going to add this little arrow in my layers. And that means that the adjustments that I'm making on this layer are only affecting the layer directly below it. I'm going to turn my saturation down. And now I've made an adjustment to just a specific part of the image. You could utilize this in a lot of different ways. For example, if you took a picture and the sky was blown out, you could mask the sky and adjust it accordingly. So it can be used to sort of fix an image, or it can be used for more of a creative endeavor. But this is really important to know how to mask things because it's going to allow you more control. Also, if I wanted to move this portion of the hand, I could do that, right? So this is where this starts to come into being sort of a collage element. I now have just this part of my image free to move around. The reason why it's important to do it as a mask and not just cut it out and copy it is because it gives me the freedom to add and subtract from it. So now let's say I've moved this portion of my finger over here. I'm just going to take off this layer because it's really ugly. And I've decided that I actually want to add more of this hand back in. I can do that with the paintbrush tool. So if I click on the paintbrush tool, the bracket keys will change the size of my tool. And if it's on black over here, black is in front, that means I'm going to be subtracting. So now I can actually subtract from this. If I want to add more in, I'm going to click this little arrow and I'm going to be able to add. So again, this is a lot easier to do with the Wacom tablet because you can really use like a real brush. Now I can very easily add in my hands. Now, if I had just copy and pasted, like if I had selected the hands and just copy and pasted them, I wouldn't be able to do this, right? Like I wouldn't have the ability to add part of this image back in. I actually kind of like the overlapping of the fabric there, and you can sort of tell that it's a second image. I'm going to flip this back because I actually don't like this right here. So I'm going to get rid of that and make that sort of tighter. Okay, so that's sort of the basics of selecting and masking. Just remember when you're masking, you want to make sure that you are actually clicked onto the masking layer. If I was on this layer, you can see there's a little white outline of it for this portion of the layer, and I was on the paintbrush tool, I would just be drawing white in, which is not what I want. Command Z will undo the steps that I just did. If I'm actually highlighted on the mask, then I'm able to add or subtract from the image.